I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Listen, Canadian director Celine Song's first movie, Past Lives, was nominated for Best Picture. She's back. Her second movie, Materialists, opens today. Will Pedro Pascal as romantic lead be enough to make you believe in rom-coms again? The group chat's here. None of them brought me roses, but they're ready to get into it. Hello to all of you. Jackson Weaver, Sarah-Tai Black, and Rachel Ho. Welcome back to the show, y'all. How's it going?
It's so good.
Hello.
It's nice to have you here. We got a bunch of things to talk about, but the thing we're going to start with is Materialists because it's a big movie. The basics here, Dakota Johnson is a high-end matchmaker, and she's caught in a bit of a love triangle. Her rich client is played by Pedro Pascal. Her broke ex, played by Chris Evans. That's the basic plot here. Rachel, when you think about this movie and what Celine Song is trying to do here, what do you like about the story that Celine Song is trying to tell?
I love that she made it. It's just, good for her. Good job that she did that.
Okay.
I think that there's a really long and rich history of, like, in literature and cinema, of these, like, romantic relationship things. Like, what do women want? What do people want? What do you want from a relationship? And we have it. Jane Austen did a lot of it. We had, the really kind of quirky stuff with, like, Cary Grant and the Golden Age. 80s and 90s, you've got some it's all about, like, feels in the 80s and 90s and the 2000s. Those rom-coms they were less about the idea of women being property or people being property or relationships being, or marriage more specifically being, like, a proposition, a business proposition. The 80s and 90s, 2000s, it was more about chemistry. It was more about how do you actually love somebody, which is, like, a wild notion. And then Celine kind of brings it back to what it was before, which is, like, a very age-old question, of age-old predicament of, do you marry for love or do you marry for convenience? Do you marry for security, for life, for, the safety and of being in a partnership like that, whether it's economic, whether it's usually economic. So I enjoy that her film adds to that. I think that it's a very realistic way of looking at relationships in 2025 to an extent. I think that I do think, as much as it didn't quite work for me, I think it is, like, a good addition to that really kind of rich tradition of looking at relationships and how they are in a very specific time period. And I think that you could definitely timestamp that thought mentality that a lot of the characters have with 2025.
Okay, you just laid out a bunch of stuff that I want to talk about, but first I feel like we should hear Materialists in action. So here's Dakota and Pedro in a scene from Materialists.
Love is easy.
Is it? I find it to be the most difficult thing in the world.
And that's because we can't help it. It just walks into our lives sometimes.
Are you hitting on me?
Definitely not.
I find it to be the most difficult thing in the world, Sarah-Tai. That is a scene between Dakota and Pedro. Shortly after that, Chris Evans enters the picture. What do you make of the chemistry between these three? Because I feel like the only thing we're seeing from this movie in terms of, like, the way this is being promoted is how much this cast loves each other, how much they love spending time together. So tell me about the chemistry of the three of them.
Good Lord, Elamin, this scene. I saw it circulating before I saw the film, and I was like, what is going on? I think that, Chris is obviously one of people's favorite Chris's. He's in the Chris trifecta. Pedro Pascal is the it boy of the moment, besides being, like, obviously conventionally attractive and all that. He's incredibly charming. Like, this man could charm like a rubber plant. Like, some people are just good at being likable, at being in relation to people in space and in language. The one thing is Dakota Johnson is not any of those things. I think I'm not trying to be mean. I find her offensiveness as a Nepo baby actually so inoffensive. Like, she could be so much worse, but she's not. She could be so much better, but she's not. I think she's a really two-note actor. I think she has slightly improved over the years, but she just doesn't have a lot of chemistry with Chris and Pedro on screen here. I think Chris and Pedro actually have more chemistry with each other in the one scene that we saw.
Okay.
And I think that Dakota Johnson, she always has this kind of, like, and I might be projecting here because I, like Chris Evans' character, I'm a poor boy, but, like, she doesn't really have that quality of as an actor where you can kind of, like, get past the patina surrounding her performances to something, like, more sincere. Like, I don't know, maybe she's just had too comfortable of a life. But the thing about this film is that it really demands in specific moments an ability to perform that sincerity, especially because this is a film that so many of the thematics are specifically about the insincerities of dating and romance. And there's something also about Celine Song's filmmaking style and writing style that really necessitates also having an actor who can sit in stillness, who can sit in prolonged moments. And sadly, Dakota Johnson just doesn't have that for me. And I think that that is like actually a huge part of why the film wasn't a success for me personally.
I should point out, Celine Song, playwright by training, right? Before turning to filmmaking, you know, she started her career as a playwright. So I think that idea of like inviting and needing stillness, I think like that comes from that sort of playwright tradition of like when you're seeing somebody on stage, they have to sort of continue to embody a thing, even when, you know, the camera is not necessarily directly on them. But Rachel sort of started us off, Jackson, by sort of laying out some of the things that this movie is trying to grapple with. This idea of maybe it's closer to like Age of Innocence than it is like, you know, When Harry Met Sally. Like there's something about, hey, what is this institution of marriage for? That's a hard question to ask in a rom-com, and yet this movie is being advertised as a rom-com. Is that misleading for this movie to be sort of positioned in that way?
I mean, first off, yeah, because there's almost no calm in this rom-com. There's one scene involving Pedro Pascal in a kitchen crouching. That's funny.
Okay.
You know, they laugh because they know what I mean. But other than that, there's not really any comedy in this rom-com. And also, I think it deals with the artificialities of romance in the modern day in a way that I think actually works in one of Dakota Johnson's two notes, because she is inaccessible and she's artificial as a character, which works with her, I agree, Nepo acting style. She's inaccessible until maybe a switch at the end. But I do think that there's a depth here, like kind of a meta analysis on how materialistic relationships actually can be and how they are business commodities. And they literally speak about them in like this Aaron Sorkin-esque finance bro talk about like, what assets do you have? What debts do you have in love? And when you have that kind of baked into Celine Song's, I guess, like filmography now after Past Lives, it does, I think, make it something other than a rom-com, at least in the first half.
Sarah-Tai, I take that point, that idea of, because I think like both Past Lives and this movie, Celine Song is sort of dealing with choices, let's say, dealing with sliding doors moments, like moments where you go, my life could go in this direction, but instead is going in this direction. Is this the right direction? That feels like rich territory to mine when you start to think about like the institution of love, the institution of marriage, and what people sort of want to get out of those institutions. When you think about the ways that she asks those questions in this movie, does it feel to you like it's kind of like surface level, or does it feel like you're actually like descending deeper and deeper into the things that complicate our relationships with those institutions?
It feels like she's trying to descend into that depth that you're talking about, but that she's failed at it a bit, which sounds harsh now that I hear it out loud, but it is the truth. I think that the marketing of this film as a rom-com is really a choice. You know, like rom-coms have a very specific codification of tropes and themes versus like a comedy drama about love and romance, you know, a romantic dramedy. You know, she does work at this matchmaking service and somehow makes $80K a year and works in office full time, which is like very, very rom-com-y in the way that she's able to do that. It's very Carrie Bradshaw making $4.50 a word of Vogue. And I do think the film tries to emulate aspects of the rom-com in order to upend it and to undo it with a sort of depth. But I think that they fail at that in a way. And I think that it just doesn't do a good job of that, and so it fails on both counts. And I think that, you know, without spoilers, and it will become very clear to people once they see the movie, it introduces this really urgent situation that gets resolved pretty hollowly, and mostly in terms of Dakota Johnson's character rather than the character who's directly affected and impacted. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, if you had tried to make a rom-com and not undo a rom-com, maybe you could have gotten somewhere, but you've kind of failed at both counts. And I was thinking a lot after the film about the list that Celine Song and A24 released about the films that inspired The Materialists.
The syllabus, as they put it. Yes.
The syllabus, yeah. Gosford Park, there's a lot of Mike Lee.
Age of Innocence is on that list.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's like, if you don't deliver at the level of Scorsese's Age of Innocence, if you don't deliver at the level of like Ang Lee's Sense and Sensibility, like in terms of the substance of the filmmaking, in terms of what it actually means to make a romantic comedy that makes you feel how you want to feel, and specifically how it makes you feel that way. You know, releasing a list like that, it just makes all the film's flaws all that more apparent. You know, it's like if Addison Rae was like, I'm really inspired by Grace Jones. You know.
Hot take, Age of Innocence, Scorsese's best movie. But I'm going to move on without even accepting any responses to that. Rachel, before I move on from Materialists, we've talked about Celine Song coming off an Oscar nomination for Past Lives. I mean, what a reception to that movie. When you think about this movie, how does Materialists kind of set up a trajectory and a voice for her sort of moving forward?
I don't think it's going to work against her, but the fact is there's a lot of parallels between the two movies. You got a love triangle, but it's not even a love triangle between like three people. You've got a protagonist who's dealing with, you know, like her past, her present, her future, all those types of things. And it sounds great on paper. I think in Past Lives, it worked really, really well. I think that was executed near like perfection. But this one, it feels like quite a drop off in my opinion. I don't know if that's what I'm wrestling with in terms of why it disappointed me so much, because I am comparing it to Past Lives, which isn't fair to the Materialists, I have to say, but I can't help it. And it feels like I would love to see her kind of do something else, go beyond this romantic situation. And even I understand if that's where her passion lies. That's
second
where
movie, Rachel.
her interest is. I know.
Yeah.
But she pulls at a lot of threads of like different themes that are inside that have nothing to do with romantic relationships. And it would be great to see her take those themes and run with that. And I would like that kind of to be the trajectory rather than kind of just like Hollywood stunt casting of really pretty people in another love triangle rom-com.
Mind
It's not a
you,
rom-com.
Chris
I agree.
Evans. Sorry,
He
I
doesn't
was
play
just gonna say,
poor. No, he can't play poor.
he doesn't play poor. He plays
can't.
poor. He plays poor. Like
I'm sorry.
it's very like not another teen
unconvincing.
movie the way he plays poor.
It's like Jakey Jake again. Like he's not poor. Like it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Worth noting, Celine Song has written 2 movies about love triangles, but also her husband also.
Justin Kriskis.
Yeah.
Challengers.
He wrote Challengers, aka the Zendaya tennis movie.
Yeah.
That is 3 movies from one couple about love triangles. What is going on in that relationship?
Are they okay?
I think so, actually. I think they're exploring it more honestly than other people are. Okay,
Fair enough,
I want to talk about another movie by a Canadian director. This one is a debut. It's called Boxcutter. It's the story of Rome, who's an aspiring Toronto rapper, and the day that he's supposed to meet this big producer, the laptop that has all his songs gets stolen because of course it does. It's directed by Reza Dahya, and it's also an ode to Toronto's local rap scene. Here's a clip.
Check, check.
Louder. Spit something, all right?
What do you mean?
My cousin tells me that Richie's having a private event tonight. Be there at 8.
Yo, Sid, come on, man. You left the door open.
Sid, we got robbed, man.
Hey, yo, hold on. I put everything into this.
So what?
I need to get to that event.
Even if it doesn't work out, at least I tried.
That is a scene from the new movie Boxcutter that is filmed entirely in Toronto, starring a predominantly Toronto cast. I should say, including comedian Commotion regular Marlon Palmer is in it. The producer of the show's theme song, Rich Kid, is also in that movie. Sarah-Tai, how do you feel about Boxcutter?
I love Boxcutter. It was the opening night at Regent Park Film Festival where I work. It's such a scrappy, little film. It's got a lot of heart. I think it offers a lot of much needed representation of the reality of Toronto life. You know, specifically the way that young Black and Brown folks and young Black and Brown creative folks and artists have to be so resilient and so enduring to try to find their way in the kind of hellscape that Toronto is right now in terms of gentrification, in terms of policing of space. I think the film does an amazing job of showing that really subtly but impactfully. It's really fresh. It's really energetic. I think it's also like a double commentary on what it means to make a film like Boxcutter and to be making a film like Boxcutter in the city. And yeah, it's just such a specific representation of Toronto on screen that it's so special and so true to the experience of living in Toronto, and the way you just feel like you're just getting shit on, but despite it all, you're like, I feel like I have something to create which will be impactful in some way.
Yeah,
I think it's very much an ode to that.
It's a movie about how inhospitable it is to create art in the city while also trying to say, I have to create art in the city. I think there's something really resilient about that push. Rachel, I know that yesterday you moderated the Q&A at the premiere of this movie. Let's talk about this because it's playing in 2 theaters in Toronto for a week right now. It's going to be on video demand and Crave later this year. But I know you have some thoughts about like the lack of space for Canadian movies in Canadian theaters. Can you just tell me a little bit about how you feeling about that, Rachel?
I think there's a kind of a misunderstanding or a bit of a misnomer that Canadians don't care about Canadian films, which is why Canadian films don't do well. When I say well, I mean financially well. And I really don't agree with that. I think that Canadians are very interested in Canadian films if they are given the opportunity to watch Canadian films. But the problem is that we just don't have, like, forget the resources, like that's already an issue in terms of making a film. But when it comes to the actual distribution, it's really difficult. And I don't think it should just rest on Crave or CBC Gem's shoulders of footing the streaming for it, because these films deserve to be seen in a cinema just as much as Materialists does, just as much as a Marvel movie, a Mission Impossible film. And in my opinion, I think Cineplex has a lot to answer for that because they effectively have a monopoly over movie chains in this country. Like, I know there are other ones, but they are the main one. They are the one that is arguably the most accessible for people to go to. And they will take up, 5 screens for a Marvel movie. But when it comes to Canadian film, they only grant it that, 1 week, 2 week, really, really tight release. And I remember a couple years ago, there were 2 really great Canadian films came out, Brother and Rice Boy Sleeps. They basically went on top of each other. Like, one went out 1 week, one went out the next week. And it's not really letting them breathe. It's not giving audiences a chance. Forget the fact that it only showed in the Varsity Theater here in Toronto. So if you're not around here, how are you going to see it? And I it's something that bothers me a lot because when I see a film like Boxcutter, which I love, and I think that not just Toronto people need to see it, I think all of Canada would really enjoy it. And it's going to be really difficult until it comes out on streaming for people to see it. And that's fine too. Like, streaming is a very legit way to watch, to consumer media. But I think a film like this, it deserves a theatrical release. And I think Canada and the different layers of the ecosystem and the powers that be should do a far better job of getting that distribution in. Like, when you look at Quebec, for example. Quebec, it's not difficult for French Canadians to access French Canadian films in theater. Like, they are able to do that. And it's disappointing that for the rest of the country, we do have this issue, because I think if Canadians got into the theaters and watched them, they would love Canadian films and they would champion Canadian films, and thereby we would get more funding for it, and so on and so forth.
Jackson, the idea that Boxcutter is playing in 2 theaters in Toronto for a week right now, as Rachel just mentioned, like, movies need time to breathe. We saw that happen with, like, for example, with a movie like Sinners. Over a bunch of weeks, more and more people are like, oh, I should go see that movie, and then they tell their friends. If you're playing at 2 screens for a week, that's not a lot. What do you make of what Rachel was saying there?
I mean, I think another thing that we have seen happen over the past few years is, I was talking to another director, Jacob Medchuk. He made this movie called Summerhood. It had Joe Flaherty in it, Christopher McDonald, John Cusack. And he was saying that the movie came out, it had all these rave reviews, but it came out the exact same year that Blockbuster went under. And what movie distributors in Canada were looking at, they were not necessarily looking at theatrical performance of Canadian movies. They were looking at the home release market, because that's where they made money and that's where Canadians would rent or buy them. And when that went belly up, the distributors are like, goodbye Canadian movies, there's no market there anymore. And I mean, now you have the CRTC debating on, like, what streamers, how much Canadian stuff they actually need to include. We have arguments about, like, how we can actually possibly get in theaters, as Rachel was just saying, which is a big issue. But there hasn't been the second strategy to prop up English language Canadian films in the way that they used to have this kind of ancillary market. And we're still searching for answers. And the theatrical issue is one that needs to get solved, but there's a secondary issue as well.
I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this show is called Commotion. Rachel Ho's here, Sarah-Tai Black is here, Jackson Weaver is here, and we got one more movie to talk about. Let's hear the clip.
Maybe they're not as bad as we think they are.
In case you forgot, our parents' war is about to become ours. Figure out which side you're on.
They've killed hundreds of us!
And we've killed thousands of them!
It's okay. I won't hurt you.
Tale as old as time, I think. I think that's the only way to describe this movie. That is a trailer for the live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon. If you're unfamiliar with this, it's a story of a people who have been at war with dragons until one kid comes along and says, maybe we can be friends with them, ? Jackson, you that's the plot, right?
Yeah, great sales.
Jackson, you've been a big critic of live-action remakes.
Yeah.
Every time that one comes out, you say, who is this for? Jackson Weaver, how you feel about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I hated the Little Mermaid remake. I hated the Peter Pan remake.
He's
I hated the
consistent.
Lilo and Stitch remake. I hate them all. But I will say, this has the den de blah. He was behind the original. He's back for this one.
Yeah.
He was making the original with live action in mind. If you watch those animated ones, you'll see the camera like trailing behind the dragon as if the videographer can't keep up with it. And it's intentional to ape real life cinematography. And I think most importantly, this is a remake of a 3D CGI animated movie. There's a little bit less magic, at least for me, versus 2D hand-drawn animation. So I'm giving all of those caveats to allow myself to say that I didn't hate this remake. I did not hate it. It's essentially a shot-for-shot remake. So we get some like better CGI dragons. Literally the jokes are word for word repeated. So nothing is really lost. We have some stupid backstory added. There's like, at the very beginning, there's this whole section where he's like, and we have diverse Vikings now.
Is that the technical word for like stupid
Black
backstory?
Vikings and indigenous Vikings. I love that you guys are here. And then they get ignored for the entire rest of the movie.
I see.
There's no purpose. But other than that, this is a shot-for-shot remake. And since it was already CGI, I'm fine with it.
I got to tell you, I was prepared for Jackson to say, I really did not like it. And I was going to say, do not talk to me or my son.
Oh my
ever
gosh!
again. This is a very large Toothless, the dragon that I'm holding currently in my hand. Rachel, when you, I'm going to just ask this question with Toothless directly in my hand. When you think about live action remakes, and this one specifically, is anything lost or gained as we sort of have a new one here?
I think I agree with Jackson that on the balance of live action remakes, this is a better one. I don't know what that like. The bar is low. Like, let's be honest, but I think it is better. I think visually it's really quite stunning. And the director Dean DeBois, he was in the audience when I went to watch it, and he talked about how they actually built the set, like they built the stadium. It wasn't just a green screen behind them, and you can tell that. So I think visually the film works really, really well. The dragons look amazing. It's stunning to look at. I do think, though, kind of ironically, the humanity is lost a little bit. I think there's a bit of warmth that gets a little bit lost in this one. I don't know if that's just because it is a shot-for-shot remake, and so you've already seen it. We've already gone through all the motions of it, and it's a very well-known story that has lived for a very long time, but there's a reason that it's lived for a very long time. So like on balance, it's not bad. It's not compared to the other ones that Jackson just mentioned. This is great. Like,
the bar is in hell. The bar is in hell.
That's true.
I'm of two minds about this, Sarah-Tai, because I think on the one hand, I feel like live action remakes inherently come from a place of not feeling like animation is a good enough medium to communicate a story. And so I think like they inherently come from that place. But on the other hand, they do tend to introduce a new generation of people, a new set of people to a story that is beloved. And so like that does kind of function in an okay way for me. Like it does bring in new people to a story that is kind of beloved. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Where do you fall on this continuous trend that is clearly not going to end anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, the inherent problem with remakes is that as time goes on, filmmaking has losing more and more of its craft. Like even the original How to Train Your Dragon came out in 2010, which is sadly like a bit of a vintage now in terms of the level of filmmaking we've come to expect from each like decade of film. Like I'm relatively young, I'm 35, but when I go to the cinema now, I'm like, have you guys ever seen a real fire on screen? Have you guys ever seen a real car crash on screen? And I can't shit on people's happiness, I guess. I'm most happy for kids. Kids are a lovely new audience to present new works to that will hopefully have them find other works that they like. But for grown-ups, I hope that you seek out original sources. And I'm not just talking about How to Train Your Dragon. I do agree with everyone here. It's a relatively okay remake. But like the Little Mermaid. Don't get me started. Don't get me started.
We actually literally don't have time to get you started.
Yeah. But there's so much craft in the past that we can appreciate, and I hope that precipitates that for some people at least.
What I love about all three of you is every once in a while you come in here and say, we are losing recipes, and I appreciate you, and I'm grateful for it. So thank you so much for this, and thank you for your time. You guys are terrific. Thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, of
Thank
course.
you.
Sarah-Tai Black is a film critic in Toronto. Their work shows up in the Globe and Mail and right here on Commotion. Rachel Ho is a film editor for Exclaim, and Jackson Weaver is a senior writer at CBC Entertainment in Toronto. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back next week. We'd love to see you then.